for another weekly garden update. It is amazing that the summer has flown by and that it's time to start thinking about the fall harvest and what I'm going to be doing for next year for my crop. I'm sitting in front of my first round of tomatoes. These got planted at the beginning of May, and I did get a lot of heat and hot weather during July. So surprisingly, these tomatoes are doing pretty well for being in since the 1st of May. They don't have a lot of damage. The one that is showing damage is the one that was planted later on, which is the Brandywine. It has some yellowing leaves, but the other ones in here look really well. I've got a red Rosso here that's turning. I've had to pick my tomatoes earlier than when they're fully ripened this season because of the heat and everything we've been experiencing. July was exceptionally dry, not a lot of rain. I had a lot of birds that were eating my tomatoes. So I am taking them even when they have a little bit of green and not fully to their true color, just to make sure that I enjoy the harvest. The tomato over here that didn't do too well was the Buratino or Pinocchio. I got the seeds from Baker Creek, and it's green, but it's very viney. I'm not going to write it off completely for next season. I think what I'm going to try with this one next season in the summer is putting it on a stake and just letting it wrap around the stake since it's very viney. I think it would do a lot better if it was staked rather than on a trellis or in a cage. So the plan is to give it one more year, see what happens before I make a decision. I've got some yellowing from them being beat up, but otherwise these look pretty good. On this side, I have 4 tomatoes that I planted at the end of May, beginning of June. So this is the second wave of tomatoes that I did. I only did 2 waves. Now this is another one that got really beat up, and I don't kind of have an opinion because despite being beat up, it's still bearing quite big fruit. So if you look here, this is one of the fruit from the Korean long, and it's about ½ a pound. Very hearty fruit. It's like a pasta sauce or a saucing tomato, so it doesn't have a lot of gel on the inside. But the vine itself, this is some of it. It's very thin like the Buratino on the other side, and it just didn't do well in the cage, which is why I was saying that the Buratino shouldn't be put in a cage, because clearly it didn't do great in the cage and it looks really beat up, but it's still producing. It goes back over there. So it's still producing, so I am kind of ambivalent on this one. It'll definitely get another try and see what happens, but it'll also be staked. Behind it is the Great White, which was a new variety of tomato that I had never planted before, and I am enamored with the Great White. I thought it would be hard to tell when that one ripened, but this is a ripened Great White. Very large fruit. This one comes in at 1 pound and 2 ounces, and most of the fruit from it was this size. Even though it's larger fruit, there were still clusters of like 3 and 4 all over the vine. So it produced really well for me here. So I really like this one, and this is a keeper in the garden. Over on that side is the orange accordion. That one was beat up as well, coming out of July. Like I said, it was very dry. And so a lot of the leaves on that one look a little crispy, but it's still giving off fruit. This fruit comes in at almost 2 pounds, and most of the fruit was this size or just a little bit smaller. So I believe I'm going to plant this one as well too, again for next year, and also stake that one because it's not as thin and viney as the Korean long, but it definitely might have benefited better from being staked. And then very last is the Cherokee Purple, which is my favorite tomato in the whole garden. This one doesn't typically bear a lot of fruit, but it bears really delicious tasting and sweet tomatoes. Not really acidic. The tomatoes aren't really acidic, but I just love the color of them. I love the taste of them. So even though it may only give me like maybe 10 or 12 tomatoes, I still will always plant this because it's my favorite tasting one. Here is another trellis in a raised bed that I was planted at the end of May as well too. And this one, again, looks pretty good. It's a little more beat up than its sister planting bed that also was planted in May. And I think that's because of the sprinklers. The sprinkler sits usually right in this walkway. And this plant has a bunch of nodes where I know it's getting wet, and it really didn't thrive. Like, it's the barest one here, so I didn't recognize the issue until too late. So I know this probably has to do with where I had my sprinklers. But I still got plenty of pineapple tomatoes off of this one, and the pineapple tomatoes were these really thick and juicy tomatoes, which I also want to keep. So I don't fault the plant in this situation because the one that was away from the sprinkler did really well. Is looking bad over here. This is a Abe Lincoln. This one's not looking too hot, but it's because it fell over. The Abe Lincoln also produced very large fruit, just about a pound in size for tomatoes. And it had quite a bit of fruit on it, and it loaded down, and I thought it was secured to the trellis, and it wasn't. So it fell over. So the ends of the trellis don't look so great, but the rest of the fruit are doing beautifully on this side. Now this area is my problem area. I had 4. There was an old German that was planted here, along with a Pantano, a Cherokee Purple, and a Black Beauty. I had to pull out the old German because something was going on with it, and I don't know if it was overcrowding, if it was disease. So this is really part of the Pantano that's over here that I'm just allowing to grow up this trellis here. I'm sorry, the stake here. But the ones in here aren't doing bad. They're nice and green, they're tall, but they aren't producing as much as any of the other ones planted at the same time. So again, I don't fault the variety because I know Cherokee Purple, not too prolific, but Black Beauty is, and the Pantano, this is the first time. So as I'm looking at it now, I can see a lot of new fruit coming on. So maybe I'll reserve my opinion for the end of the season. But for this area, the trellis area, and the other area with the 4, those I really want to keep growing until the fall, because they're the later ones, so that I can still get tomatoes. This season has definitely been my best season in almost 5 years with tomatoes, so I'm happy about how much of a harvest I've had. So it's another new morning in the garden. Last night I was ran out of the garden. There was thunder happening and some dark clouds, and I was really anxious for rain. Never got the rain, just the thunder. And that's kind of been the theme of what's been going on this summer with the garden. We'll get all these notifications of rain, and then the rain never happens. But I almost forgot to mention, I mentioned this plant that has done poorly because it's by the sprinkler. I also had an orange oxheart that was here, and I think that was the same thing with that one. I pulled it out and planted a Kajari melon. I think it's my Kajari seeds because this year the Kajari haven't done really well, and for this one to only be this size after almost a month of planting, for next season I'm going to purchase brand new seeds and see what happens because the plant did not act like this last year. Behind me are the tomatoes that I planted, the other half that I planted at the beginning of May, and for the age of them, this was more beat up than the trellis on the other side. You'll notice a large gap here with the tomatoes, and that's because I had to pull out 2 plants. The orange oxheart on this one started to show signs of damage. We had gotten a couple of hot days very early on in the growing season, and then another set kind of like beginning of June that made the orange oxheart susceptible to some disease. So even though it grew and gave a little bit of fruit, it started to die back before any of the other plants showed any other damages for the season. So I had to pull that out, as well as one other plant in here. So that's why there's a big space. And if you see the edges of this is the black strawberry, which is a cherry tomato. It's kind of crispy in spots. And I don't know if it's a disease. I don't know if it's just from the really high temps we had last month, but this one is still growing and producing. It's got a lot of different offshoots and production stems, so I'm not as concerned with this one, but I think some of this is going to die back as well. A good amount of fruit, and this one, which I think is the Black Beauty, just has a little bit of yellowing due to the weather, but again, the production that I've had from my tomatoes for this summer has been really impressive. It's one of my better years, so I think to help me fight the gardening fatigue, having these tomatoes look as good as they do is really helpful. Just hopeful I can bring them through August and into September so I can have fall tomatoes this year, which I haven't had for a very long time. So last week I updated on the 3 pineapples that were on the other side of the porch. This week I'm going to show you the ones, the Elite Gold, that did really well. They're bouncing back. So none of my pineapples survived the acclimation. They all were burned and singed and died back in some kind of way. So I am very surprised and very happy to see that all of them are coming back. They've got nice green shoots on the inside. They're pretty much getting back to their old size. And this one, it has 3 offshoots, suckers, pups. I'm not sure what you call them with pineapples, but it has 3 offshoots at the bottom of it. So I am going to just get these through outdoors through the rest of the season, and then when I put them in for the fall, I'm going to repot them, and I'm going to try to keep doing what I'm doing to them, which is basically nothing. Really just sitting them outside, allowing them to get some sun, and some shade, and just not watering them too often. They're just coming back and growing. So I know for next time, for my climate and my yard, the Elite Gold and the White Jade do a lot better than the Sugarloaf variety of pineapple in there. So I have some new additions to the garden area, and this is to my compost. So this area is where I had the 3 felt bags for composting, and the felt bags didn't fail me in any way. I decided to get the compost up off the ground that had the actual food items. When I had that squash growing in the other compost, I had to remove it, and when I removed it, I saw a mouse. And something's been nibbling in the last few weeks since I removed it. It's been nibbling on the stuff in the garden. So what I am doing is putting the frozen items and food items in here, keeping it off the ground, and then when the compost is done, I'm moving it over to metal containers. The compost that's in the bay is also going to come over here into these metal containers. I'm sure I'll need it once the season ends, but I'm just trying to get everything up and off the ground with food, and then eliminate sources of food, because I really do not want to be a host for any type of food. Swinging around here to this green giant, these are my pepper plants in the raised bed. They're my super hots, and they are doing very well. They're starting to produce and ripen and give fruit, so I'm going to have an amazing harvest for my hot peppers, and I intend to make things like red pepper flakes and sweet hot pepper jam with the tomatoes. I don't think I'm going to be doing many, if any, hot sauces. So back here with the peppers on this side, got a lot of fruit, and it's starting to switch over and change color. I've got a lot of red and orange back here. Between the scorpion peppers, the Korean hot peppers, and the habanero that's back here. The only thing that I can hope for is that I do have the chocolate habanero. I kind of believe that when I had my issues, I lost all the chocolate habanero plants. I'm hoping to see some brown at some point with the peppers, but it's just a bunch of orange and red at this point. Lastly, my peppers over here are hot peppers. This is my Hungarian yellow wax pepper. It's got a second flush of peppers. They are taking their sweet time in changing color, but they're doing well. And the mystery pepper that I planted still hasn't produced any fruit yet, so I'm unsure what that is. And that's the end of the video update for the garden. Please like and subscribe. And as always, thank you for watching.